I'd like to welcome everyone. This webinar is sponsored by the Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition. The coalition promotes Catholic ministry to all those affected by incarceration. Our goal is to recruit, train, support, and empower those called to minister with the poor and marginalized. We hope to create a more just and merciful criminal justice system closely aligned with the ministry of the Church and the teachings and the example of Pope Francis.
This webinar is one of many opportunities being created by our partnership to share resources and best practices in order to strengthen the Church's mission to advance restorative justice, which upholds the dignity of every human person.
The Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition has a steering committee of over 33 known national organization partners. We've created a number of handouts and 2 PowerPoints for you that we mentioned during this presentation. A link to the list and how to get them was included at the end of your reminder email yesterday. That link will also be sent out again with the link to the recording of this workshop. If you look to the chat section of the page, our handout number 1 is linked there and gives more details about the coalition and about how to access all of the handouts we mentioned. I would like now to introduce Sister Rita Mary Harwood, Secretary for Parish Life and Development for the Diocese of Cleveland. She has worked on the front line in prison ministry, and by working with an advisory committee since 1996, she has seen it grow from 150 to 450 volunteers to do this work. She started this ministry from scratch.
Dr. Harry J. Dudley, who is the consultant and founder of Ambulans Vobiscum Consulting, has recently retired as the Assistant Director of Certification for the USCCB Secretariat for Catholic Education. Dr. Dudley has had extensive experience in recruiting and training volunteers in church and other nonprofit settings. However, in most cases, he's not been starting from scratch, but certainly helping in the development and establishment of programs to expand their volunteer base.
Together, we hope to discuss the most frequently asked questions we've received throughout this presentation, but you are encouraged to send in your questions. We hope to answer as many of them as we can, but you should know that if you want us to follow up after this presentation, include an email or a way to contact you and we'll get back to you.
Let us open then with prayer. You are with us each moment of this day. When we're tempted to be indifferent to the needs of others, open our eyes and our ears. When we feel anxious and overwhelmed, fill our hearts with your peace and your love. When we feel depressed or despair at the state of our world, inspire us with hope. Help us to be a source of light in darkness, tenderness in suffering, comfort in loneliness, strength in vulnerability.
Let us do this sharing today to become instruments of your healing presence and power to those who are in prisons, whether they are detainees or staff, volunteers or families of those in prison, or victims or the families of victims. All are part of your family and all need your healing. Help us who have known your healing power to share it with them. Amen.
Amen. As we go through these best practices today, we will focus on 4 very important aspects for working with volunteers while doing our best to answer your frequently asked questions. First of all, planning. Using Covey's principle, begin with the end in mind. Recruiting. And having that recruiting be a team effort. It's not something you have to do alone. Training. As you will see through our presentation today, there are many resources and people who are available and eager to help you. And finally, supporting volunteers. Ongoing support is important as the original recruitment. All of these are equally important, as you would want to build them into the plan you and your team develop.
I have learned that we need to develop a team, work with them to develop a plan, focus on where we will start and where we want to be in 5 years, and then plan the steps to get there. There are so many different approaches one can take, aren't there, sister?
There certainly are. Yes, ministry to the incarcerated opens a whole world of possibilities. Ministry in the prisons and in the jails, reentry work, issues to advocate for, providing for the needs of the incarcerated and those who are reentering our society, restorative justice work, pen pals, prayers in the parish community, supports for family members and for the victims of crime. The possibilities are really great. However, when I think of this ministry, I think very simply of Matthew chapter 25. For I was in prison and you came. That's become the mission statement of our ministry here in the Diocese of Cleveland.
Thank you, sister. Could you talk about the beginnings of the prison ministry in the Diocese of Cleveland? How did you get started?
Work on this ministry began in the late 90s in response to a request from our auxiliary bishop, Bishop Quinn. The bishop called a group of people together. Most of us were diocesan employees at the time, and explained that he hoped that in some way we would be able to develop a ministry that would unite us as a diocesan community, would really link us to those who were incarcerated. And at the very end of the meeting, he said to us, all of us gathered there, if anyone would be interested in taking on this ministry, would you just let me know? I met him about 5 weeks later and said, Bishop, did anybody offer to take that ministry? And he said, no, nobody did. What's wrong with you? I had to think really seriously about that question. And although I knew nothing about prison ministry, I really felt the call to respond. And so I established a committee to develop the ministry and to plan for it. And that committee was really a wonderful group. It included people who really understood from a variety of points of view the whole world of incarceration. So there were judges, lawyers, police officers, members of the correctional institutions, the offices of the diocese, family members who had had a loved one or did have a loved one incarcerated, formerly incarcerated people, and just those who came to say, I want to help. Once the committee was established then, we began consultation, very broad consultation with all of those areas. We studied the issues. We looked at models of ministry across the country. We had conversations with members of the institutions, particularly the wardens and the directors. We felt that this was very important from the very beginning to establish a partnership with them, to establish a positive relationship. Once I had gotten the committee together and we did a lot of study and consultation, we began then the development of a very detailed plan, kind of a vision for the future. We looked at the various aspects of prison ministry. First of all, to those who were incarcerated. That was our primary concern at that time. And then for the families of those who were incarcerated. We saw that it was important, because not much was known about incarceration, that we really do a good educational program that could be made available, not only to those who were in ministry in the diocese already, but to the broader Catholic community. We went any place we were invited. There's an outline of the prison ministry as we established it at that time and have been developing it over the years. It's handout number 7 in the packet that you received. Once we made the proposal then, we took that to the consultative bodies of the diocese. We felt that it was really important to have a good foundation of support at the diocesan level. And so we went to the Presbyteral Council first, the Council of Priests, then to the Diocesan Pastoral Council, a representative of the laity of the diocese, and then to the Conference of Religious Leaderships. we received a very positive response and encouragement from all of those groups. And I think that continues to be a part of our ministry today. I would say the Church of the Diocese of Cleveland supports this ministry in so many ways. We decided then that our first focus would be on those who are incarcerated, and that we develop further aspects of the ministry as we continue to grow, to get volunteers, to grow in understanding, and when we had a better understanding of what were the needs out in the community.
Thank you. Once you had that approval and support, what were your next steps, Sister Rita?
The first was education. We felt that it was really important to educate our parishes about the issues. Once they understood the issues, we felt that people then would understand why they were needed, why we were looking for volunteers and help. We began to offer presentations on incarceration in the parishes to help people understand who was being incarcerated, and people are often surprised by that. Why? What life in jail and in prison was like, what the sentences were being assigned to people at this time in our history. Especially, we talked about the impact on the family members. It said that when a loved one goes to prison, the whole family goes. And certainly we've learned that through listening to people over the years. We focused on the message of Scripture, at Jesus relating with people, especially people on the margins. We reflected on the dignity of each and every person. Every person is worth so much more than the worst thing they've ever done. We looked at the principles of Catholic social teaching and how we're being called today. We built relationships with the administration of the jails and the prisons. We talked to them. We asked them what were their needs, what did they see as the needs of the prisoners, and how could we help? What would be our next step? Then we looked at the process that we wanted to follow as we went through the development of this ministry. We wanted to continue to consult. We knew that we didn't have all the answers, so we knew that we needed to continue to be open, to study, to review various models, and to continue conversations with the institutions. I just want to say that because what I've learned over the years is that when the director of a jail or the warden of a prison is changed, the relationship changes. So it's important to continue to build that relationship. Finally, we looked at recruitment. We put out a call to people across the 8 counties of the diocese by placing notices in the parish bulletins. We encouraged people who had already learned about the ministry to come forward to talk to others about the possibility of becoming a prison ministry, to invite others to really consider this call seriously. We had meetings in areas for those who might be interested and want to get more information. And then the application process finally was a very simple form for application, which included a recommendation from the pastor of the parish, the person's pastor, and the opportunity for them to talk with someone who was already involved in the ministry. Harry, you've had a lot of experience in this area. Can you share some best practices that you've learned about recruiting?
Thank you, Sister. One best practice I've learned is when you have a plan, it makes it easier for you to develop a working ministry description for volunteers, including things like the name of the ministry, the job title within the ministry, the description of the task, the amount of time needed for the task. And then it's important to place that ministry description within the context of Scripture and church documents. What do the documents say? What do the Scriptures say about this? In addition, as the work develops, it's important to add where one would work, the name of their supervisor or mentor, the length of time commitment, which I encourage to be annually renewed rather than assume they're there for the rest of their lives, and space for comments and special procedures.
Can you talk about some of the ways that you did screening?
Sure. Another best practice I've learned is the importance of careful screening by interview. One handout, our handout number 2, includes material on screening and lists the kind of helpful information that we and the candidates need to know to make a decision. And again, for those who don't have it, the link to get to those handouts is on the chat room and visible now. Mm-hmm. Among the usual interview questions about experience, be sure to ask about their expectations by encouraging them to fill in the blanks with such questions as, my primary reason for wanting to help in prison ministry is. When it comes to this role, my fear is that. My hope is that. And I'm excited about. And I feel that I offer the following talents to make me able to share this ministry. And finally, I feel that I need the following things to make me better able to do this work. That helps us to know what training they need. Mm-hmm. Now, the big question is, Sister, how do we find volunteers?
That's a really good question. When Jesus was looking for volunteers, he went out and talked with people. He personally touched them. He called them by name and he invited them to follow and to come and see. I think we can use the very same method. I wanted to share just 2 little stories that really struck me when I thought about this. I had put, as I mentioned, notices in the parish bulletins. And one of the men who did eventually volunteer, Bob was his name, said he saw the message the first week it was in the bulletin and thought, oh, that's nice, I hope somebody offers. He said, I saw it the next week and I thought to myself, oh, I really hope somebody else offers. So the 3rd week I saw it and I thought to myself, oh no, I think God might be calling me. And he said, the 4th week I saw the message in the bulletin, I said, God, I'm coming to that meeting, I'll be there. Another one was a woman by the name of Ellen. At the time she was 78 years old, saw the message in the bulletin and said to herself, you know, I haven't been wanting to go, she was retired, and play cards with the ladies in my apartment. She said, that invitation looks a whole lot better to me. She began ministry at our local prison and continued for 6 years. And did a wonderful job. She was a grandmother to all the inmates in that prison. And so I think that what that says to me is that remember, gender, age, culture, background, those are not the indicators of a good prison minister. But a person who really is feeling called, is generous with their time, and is willing to volunteer. That's who I believe God is calling, and I do believe it is a call.
The best recruiters are firm volunteers. All involved need to be both ministers and marketers. They can especially make a difference when they are given the opportunity to share their story.
Our team created a video, which I think has been a real gift to us. It was filmed at the Cuyahoga County and the Geauga County jails, and I am so appreciative of the administration allowing that to happen. It showed so well, and I hope that you will take a look at it. It showed so well the impact of the ministry of those volunteers on the men and women that they visited in the institutions. It's clear that the relationships that they developed among themselves as a team helped both those who were incarcerated and the volunteers to grow.
This video is a fine example of what a difference volunteer witness can make. Our handout number 6 has links to the YouTube and the volunteer pages for the Catholic Diocese of Cleveland's prison ministries. And I know you shared with me, Sister, even recently, people saw it and have been calling into you to ask how they could help. Could you talk a little about the training volunteers received? How did you go about doing that? Who was involved? What was the response?
After completing the plan for the ministry, we talked within the committee, we studied and consulted with others to determine what does a volunteer in prison or jail, what do they need? in preparation for that ministry with the men and women who are in the prison or jail, we decided that we're an 8-county diocese, and so we decided that the trainings that we were going to do would be offered in 3 different geographic areas with a faculty drawn from that local area. So we had 3 separate faculties, one for each of the areas, and they included the judges, lawyers, police officers, prison officials, corrections officers, social workers, someone who is now doing prison ministry, pastoral ministers, family members, formerly incarcerated persons, etc. Those faculties were rather large, but it really turned out to be a very good way to go about doing it. They offered the opportunity, these workshops, to learn, to discuss, and to question. They were very, very interactive. We encouraged people. We were trying to develop a sense of community among the ministers. The schedule for the day was not rushed. It gave people a lot of opportunity to get to know one another and to talk, to build relationships. We were forming a prison ministry community. The total time of this initial training was about 14 to 60 hours. We had 148 volunteers complete this experience. 2 of the workshops were done over 2 weekends, and the other was done over 2 full days, one day after the other. Once we had completed the training then in all 3 areas, we had a celebration with the bishop, and he commissioned the new volunteers. We did this as a part of a prayer service that we had planned for the legal and safety forces of the diocese. So during that prayer service, those who had been commissioned were called forth. They received a small pin, and which they could wear when they were going to the jail or the prison, and a certificate that named them as a certified prison ministry for the diocese. We found that at the end of the training, some were very eager to get started, and others were more hesitant, thinking they wanted to think about it more. And I think that was good for us. It was a way for us to get to know the volunteers, to see their strengths and their interests. And as one group then was placed into the institutions, others began to step forward. So it was a gradual introduction.
Our handout number 8 is the outline of the Cleveland training for volunteers. The book Messengers of Hope from the Dismas Ministries, pictured in this slide, is another excellent resource available at www.dismasministries.org. Remember that those of you who want to be trained and to train, you are not alone. This is a new Catholic Prison Ministries. There's now a new National Formation Committee formed to address the need for newly developed national standards for pastoral care in multiple settings, including elder care hospitals, but especially prisons, and appropriate levels of formation and certification for the levels needed. Our handout number 3 provides good adult education training principles to use in the programs that you develop. Now, what other resources did you develop, Sister?
Based on the training that we had done, we developed a prison ministry handbook, which we continue to edit and expand as the ministry itself has expanded. This has been really very, very helpful to us. We gave each minister a copy of the handbook, and as we add new sections, those are added into those. You can see a copy of that in the handout number 9.
Can you share with us what was the process used when placing the volunteers in the various institutions?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there were some who, after that initial training, were ready, and we began then with those. We started to determine, first of all, the institution that they wished to go through. We wanted to place them according to their geography and according to their interest. So we made arrangements then with the various institutions for each of those volunteers to go through the training that's required by the institution and to get the background checks that all of those institutions require. Once we had done that and the volunteer was approved by the institution, we helped them then to enter into the type of ministry that they wanted to do. In the beginning, many of those were religious activities, Bible study, book discussions, prayer services, that type of thing. And what we've noticed over the years that type of ministry has really expanded. So as one group of ministers moved into the institution, then others would step forward and we would go through the same process with them. So it's a gradual process that we followed. We check in, and especially in the beginning, to see how each of the volunteers was doing. As I mentioned, we have branched out in our ministries as the need or the desire became apparent. I'm really amazed now as I look at the various ways in which volunteers are involved in the prisons and jails of the diocese. We have developed new forms of ministry as the need arose.
What are some of the ways you've supported the volunteers and provided for their ongoing development?
I think we've done that in three ways. First of all, locally, through the relationship that's been built between those ministering in the particular jail or prison. We work as teams and take the time either before or after the session that we have to visit and talk with one another and to pray together. The second way is area-wise, through meeting periodically, the prison and jail ministers who are in a specific geographic area. Each has a facilitator who gets them together to assess the ministry, for input on a particular topic of interest, for times of prayer and reflection, for fun, like a barbecue or a picnic, and for a gathering, sometimes at a parish location or at someone's home. The third way that we have kind of kept people together and growing is by sponsoring diocesan-wide conferences for the whole group on various topics. Oftentimes, too, we will invite diocese prison ministry from our neighboring diocese to join us for that. We've had presentations or days on the impact of addiction, the establishment of various courts in our area, the drug court, the veterans, the trafficking court, the Ohio plan for prisons of the state of Ohio. That was a very, very interesting conference. The director came to be with us. A conference on restorative justice, the importance of establishing and observing boundaries. There's all kinds of topics, and periodically we will survey the group to see what it is that they would appreciate further education on. Harry, can you talk about some of the ways, the practices you have for supporting volunteers?
Well, Sister, you've named a lot of good ones, let me tell you that. I know someone asked us, how do you keep them engaged when it takes a long time to go through the process of being accepted in the prisons? Well, a lot of these social events are a good way to do that.
They are.
I've also learned that the best support for volunteers is to be sure that they know where to go when they have a problem. They need to know it's okay to ask for help and that they're going to be held accountable. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And have to care for them in times of need. And that's what these social gatherings provide the opportunity to do. And most importantly, to have others to celebrate with in times of joy as they share the good things they've learned.
I really think that sense of community is so important, that those who are volunteering in the prisons and the jails have a sense that they belong to a group greater than just themselves. And there's a lot of support that comes with that. Handout number 6 gives you more ideas and questions to help you plan your support for your volunteers.
Good. Good. Now, can you tell us more about how you approach and promote ongoing recruitment, Sister?
Yes, I think one way that I find many people are coming up to be engaged in the ministry is through education. We continue to do educational programs across the diocese, and very often at the end of that time, people will say, you know, I'd like to be involved. Ministry fairs at the parishes are also very important. If you have volunteers in a parish community to participate in those ministry fairs, they talk to people and get them involved. The parish bulletin announcements continue to be effective. Our website and the video, which continues to speak to people looking for information and feeling called. I had a number of people say they looked on the internet, found the website, went to the website, watched the video, and knew that that was something that they were really being called to. And then I think just encouraging those in prison ministry to invite their friends and their relatives to get involved. It's people talking to people. I think that's a very effective way of recruitment.
I agree. Can you share more about how you sustain the ministry, Sister?
Yes, I think that in the beginning, that formal commissioning of the prison ministers was very significant. That said something to the whole community. And so I think it raised the awareness to the broader community, and I think that was good. The workshops and the notices that are sent out are very important. Because the ministry has grown not only in numbers, but in ways people can get involved, people are being drawn into it. For example, we have a letter writing and a card sending ministry that has gotten going, and I've noticed that for a number of people, once they kind of have their toe into the pond, it looks more inviting, and some of the fear that they may have been experiencing is wiped away, and they're looking for deeper ways to be involved.
Others do formal appreciation dinners and award certificates, and publish the names and stories of volunteers in diocesan newspapers, websites, and elsewhere, extending each time the invitations to others to join.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Since the ministry is not an established ministry of the diocese, how will you support it moving forward?
I was concerned about that, and so about 2 months ago, I began the establishment of an advisory council for the ministry. I had a committee, and that was very helpful, very effective, but I thought we needed something a bit more formal. Those guidelines are being written now, and if in a month or so anyone would like to have a copy of them, I'd be really glad to share it, and I'm sure I will post it on our website. But the guidelines, I think, will be helpful. Certainly we have stated a mission statement and goals for the advisory committee, the duties and responsibilities for which they would be accountable, membership, frequency of meetings, and then committees. The committees to support each of the goals that we've established. I think this advisory council, just from working with the committee for the development, is making it very apparent to me that this will carry the ministry forward, I think, in some very exciting ways.
I noticed your plan indicates broader areas of ministry to the incarcerated. Could you just mention some of those your volunteers are working on at this time?
Sure, I'd be glad to. One of the directors of one of the jails called me which I think is a reflection of the relationship, when he realized that they really needed some help, especially for those who were in the jail and are indigent. There was no one to put money on their books, and so they weren't able to go to the commissary to buy what they needed, and asked, therefore, if we could help in supplying that. As a result, now I'm just absolutely amazed at the generosity of people from parish communities, from schools, from religious education programs, who are providing us with things like toothpaste and toothbrushes, shampoo, lotion, socks, all kinds of supplies that we then put into a gallon plastic bag and provide for those who are indigent and are in need of supplies. We've also been asked to help to provide clothing for those who are leaving the jails, especially we're in a colder area of our country here in Cleveland. And so when a person is leaving jail in January and they entered the jail in July, their clothes certainly are not adequate. And so that's another area where we're having people who are providing clothing for those who are leaving, as well as the state of Ohio has approved that each person who leaves their institution can be supplied with 3 sets of nice clothing they could use going for an interview or to begin a new job. And so parish communities people are working to provide some of that clothing. Our ministry has expanded into the juvenile detention ministry area. We have volunteers visiting the young people at the juvenile detention facilities in the area. We have programs offered by the students at John Carroll University using the Power Source program created by Bethany Kasarjan. It's excellent and has been very effective in the both in the county facilities and in the state facilities here in the area. The Carroll students also started a ministry of basketball with the young people at the Juvenile Detention Center. They play basketball for a period of time, have a wonderful time, and then sit down in a circle to just engage in conversation and enjoy pizza. So those are just some of the ways that we've begun to expand the ministry. Certainly, the ministry has expanded in the number of programs that we're doing in the institution. We have a nurse who's offering a program at one of our prisons called The Biggest Loser, and that institution won the prize several years in a row for having lost the most weight. So the creativity is wonderful, and I see it in just a variety of ways.
That's great. One particular recent program deserves special mention here, Sister Rita. It's the LEAF ministry program. Could you explain that a little?
Yes. In the original outline, when you look at it, you'll notice that we did mention ministry to the families of the incarcerated. In 2014, finally, we got that ministry started, and it came because a young mother had called me, 3 little boys, to ask if I could help to find somebody who could be like a father to her 3 little boys. I worked on that through Big Brothers and Sisters and Catholic Charities, and at the end of the conversation, she said, "Is there anything for me?" And so that made me really realize we needed to look seriously at the ministry to families of the incarcerated. We started the LEAF ministry that stands for listening, encouraging, assisting families of the incarcerated. We now have the ministry started in 2014, and it's for families who have a loved one incarcerated. We have 7 groups now across the diocese. They meet once monthly. They're built very much on a model similar to the Al-Anon groups. It's facilitated by the volunteers, but in all honesty, I think it is people ministering to people. I'm just absolutely amazed at the community that's built in that. I've had so many people say to me, "What would I ever have done without this group?" It's a ministry of people supporting and caring for one another, and it's been a beautiful ministry in this diocese. We also have started a ministry of letter writing and card sending, facilitated by a volunteer at the parish level. We've had a ministry of pen pals. We have between volunteers and men and women in prison. Parish is sponsoring this ministry. Letters are delivered to the parish, so when the person is putting an address on the envelope, the address is that of a parish, who then keeps like a little file, and the person can come in on Sunday morning to see if there's a letter from their prison friend in the file for them. I think this has been especially touching for me There are many sisters in my religious community who have become pen pals, and it's been a beautiful ministry for them, especially for the retired.
Would you like to share that story about the one who received a card through this effort?
I'd love to. I went to a workshop that was being given in one of the parishes about a year ago. And one of the speakers was a man who had been on death row for 37 years. And he had been falsely accused by a young boy who was frightened and just said anything. And he ended up in prison for 37 years. And when asked in an interview, what gave you hope, he said, one day a card came under the door of my cell. It was a card for Valentine's Day, a card from a group of Catholic ladies in a parish. It told me that someone was thinking about me. He said, I wrote back to them to say thank you. And from that point on, I received a card for every single holiday. He said that card, those cards that came, gave me a tremendous sense of hope.
Wow. As Sister Rita and I have said before, in all of this, you're not alone. The Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition continues to explore further partnerships to develop more national training opportunities like these webinars. This is the 6th or 7th. We seek more funding. We're trying to grow the army of volunteers needed. In particular, handout number 1 on page 2 shares information about the upcoming National Association of Catholic Chaplains Conference, Partners in Pastoral Care, continuing the healing ministry of Jesus in the name of the Church. That will be at Mundelein, St. Mary of the Lake Seminary, May 31st to June 3rd in 2019, in conjunction with the National Association of Lay Ministry Conference. A 6-hour session on prison ministry will be live streamed and presented by Father George William, chaplain at San Quentin. Other 90-minute sessions will also be offered in prison ministry by other members of the coalition. And I wanted to highlight our next webinar will be on Tuesday, May 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where Ofelia de los Santos and Ashley Feasley will speak about ministry with migrants. Sister Rita?
To learn more about the CPMC, please email us at catholicCPMC@gmail.com. And be sure to bookmark our under construction website, and you see the website address there, and check for further developments starting in August.
I want to thank you for participating in this workshop. A list of resources and a link to them will be emailed to participants along with the link to the recording. Handout number 10 is a simple evaluation was included to help us make this and future trainings even better. You can email us your evaluation comments and your questions at catholicpmc@gmail.com. We both wish to thank you for your commitment to this ministry, and we're on for the moment should you have further questions. I just see one that arrived now from someone named Pamela who said, how do you handle situations when a volunteer steps outside the boundaries of the program or the rules of the jail? Would you like to say something to that, Sister?
I'd be very glad to say, to comment on that. It's very important when you're doing prison ministry to follow the regulations very carefully. You don't make the rules for yourself, and I think that's a very strong point in our training. We're not the ones to determine what we should be doing, what our behavior should be in the institution. Those are very carefully prescribed and need to be followed. I don't hesitate to say to a volunteer, if you cannot follow those prescriptions, whatever they are, then you're going to have to withdraw from the institution and from the ministry. I must say that in the time that I have facilitated this ministry, which is now almost 20 years, I've only had one incident of that happening. When I know of it, I will speak to the volunteer. I have the volunteer go and speak either to the warden or the director or the person who's responsible for that area. And in most cases, if that happens, they may be not permitted to enter the institution for a period of time. And then when they come back being able to assure both the institution and the ministry that they will abide by what the regulations are. So that is a very strict, and it needs to be a requirement of a volunteer in the prison system.
I agree. It's important that they know that they're accountable and that their behavior affects the ministry continuing in that jail.
That's correct. Right.
I think the earlier they learn that, the better it is. We had one person who is an office of one, who's only part-time in the chancery and have other duties in addition to prison ministry. And she's doing her best, but she'd appreciate what's the most important tool to use to continue to support the ministry when you're a person, an office of one.
Yes, that's a very good question. I am the Secretary for Parish Life and Development here at the diocese, and so the ministry to the incarcerated is one ministry in a very long list of areas of responsibility. So what I have found to be extremely helpful is to develop a good volunteer team who are going to help you. That's why I'm working on this advisory council right now. These are people who will really take on the responsibility for planning, for coordinating, for facilitating in some of the counties. They're the ones that are gathering the people together. So this by no means is just my ministry. It's a ministry of, now we have close to 450 volunteers, and it's all volunteer. I would be the only employee connected. So it is possible, but I think what you have to do yourself is to realize I can't do this all myself, and I don't need to, because there are people there who are very, very willing. This is a ministry that catches your heart. And I see that in the volunteers. One man said to me, I went in the first time, he said, my knees were knocking and I was scared. He said, I ran a big company. I had 350 employees, and there I was standing in front of 30 men and my knees were knocking. I prayed to the Holy Spirit, and he said, and I went on. He said, I walked out of that jail 4 feet above the ground, and I've been like that ever since. He said, I give what I can, but I receive so much more. I think that's true of this ministry.
I think so too. Sandra from the Diocese of Fresno was concerned that they've noticed a lot of their new volunteers only volunteer due to curiosity. And after they're done with the extensive clearance and are approved, some start going, and after a couple of visits, they quit. How do you handle that?
I think that in your interviewing, in your training, I think that some of that should become evident. I would watch for that. One thing that I found that helps, if you can make the arrangement with the director or the warden of the institution, is to have the opportunity to do a tour of the jail or the prison, so that when that volunteer goes into the institution, it's not the first time they're going into an institution, that they have a good sense. So it's not a matter of being curious. I know what I'm going to be walking into, and I want to be there. So other than that, I wouldn't know what to suggest. I think it's a screening, really, and training.
I agree, sister. I think if we do more of the screening up front, that comes out when people start answering the question about what their fear is or what they hope for, because you begin to realize that the curiosity comes out more than the need to serve.
Right. The other thing that I think is so important, and I never mentioned it in this, is the confidentiality piece. You know, it's very important that a person who's going into a jail or a prison is very aware that that is not something. Then there's a requirement for confidentiality that comes with that you don't go back out into the community to talk about who it is that you visited with, certainly, or even to share what people have said. I know that I say to our volunteers, you know, you can always find out why a person is in prison or in jail, but why do you have to? Don't even look it up. It's why. There's no reason for that. And I think that's to respect the dignity of the person and to respect their right to their own information and their own story is really extremely important.
Someone mentioned they were having difficulties reaching the handouts. If you do, please send your email to the Catholic PMC@gmail.com, and we will email you a new link, a fresh link, to see if that helps you. We're sorry about that.
The other thing I wanted to mention that I didn't is that LEAF ministry. I've had a couple of dioceses. It started now in the Diocese of Columbus. There is a PowerPoint presentation in your resources that might be of interest to you. I just would want to say this is a wonderful ministry. I found another one in New Zealand, but didn't get the permission to go there to observe it. So you've got a PowerPoint now that might be helpful to you if that is an area where you might want to expand or to begin a ministry.
I agree. We also included this particular PowerPoint for all of you so that you could use it should you need to, or any part of it. And we're willing, even after this, if you send your questions to the CatholicPMC@gmail.com, we'll do our best to respond to them and send additional things if you request them.
Great.
It's been it's a very special ministry. Not everyone is ready for it. One good question someone asked was about the reentry programs, and I've shared that Catholic Charities and St. Vincent de Paul Society both do extensive reentry program work in the different dioceses where they are, and they are a member of the Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition. So know that they're available to help as well. So we're excited that there are so many people growing in an interest in this, and by registering for these webinars, we'll include you in updates on a regular basis as we continue developments. Especially CatholicPrisonMinistries.org. Right now, all you see is site under construction, but webpage is being very extensively developed so that our partners and their affiliates can make available their information through that website. So if there are no further questions at this point, we're very glad you joined us, and thank you for your time with us, and we wish that God will bless you in the continued work that's so desperately needed.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye now.